Hi, this is Redline TV, and this time we're doing a short in the context of what's been happening in the Labour Party, the kind of outrageous but rather predictable move by Starmer to exclude Jeremy Corbyn from being an MP. I say predictable because I think most of us knew it was coming, but it has got that kind of slightly outrageous thing because it's such a load of garbage, the reasons that are being officially given on the motion. And I think many of us have been talking about this, talking in groups, talking separately. But of course, one place you're not allowed to talk about this is in local Labour parties. You are not allowed to speak about it. But in Redline, of course, we are talking about it. So we're all going to have our say. We're all going to go around. Maybe we'll disagree with each other, but as ever, it will be comradely. So, Mike, let me come to you first of all. What's your take on what's been going on?
Dispiriting in some ways, Jackie, but again, I don't think there is a project outside the Labour Party. I don't think leaving the Labour Party constitutes a political project. I appreciate comrades like yourself and Graham have not been given the option of whether they want to leave or not. But I guess my thoughts were brought to some kind of clarity last Saturday when John McDonnell visited Glasgow for a campaign of socialism meeting. And while he was, as usual, self-deprecating, he was wise, he was encouraging in places, I think a good number of us left the meeting a little bit disorientated, or I guess just not particularly equipped with any understanding of where we go next and what coherent and agreed resistance is available to us, joined up resistance. The campaign group do great things individually as individual MPs. I don't think we can ask them to substitute for the working class. They can't step into a vacuum where a majority of working class people are not as yet signed up to the socialist project. They do good work in their CLPs with community groups, with trade union campaigns, attempting to build the left. But as I say, there does not seem to be an agreed resistance and project of resistance to which the Labour left can sign up to. And I think the one key thing which concerned a good number of us was that at one point in the meeting, John essentially said that we have been here before. And I don't think we really have been here before. The scale of the attacks, and I don't think we need to rehearse them. They are, as you say, Jackie, in Islington North, but Jeremy's only the most high-profile subject of these attacks. And I think they're of a scale and of a type that confirmed that the people around Starmer in particular would be quite happy to see the wholesale evaporation of the left of the party. Now, you can't kill an idea, but these people are giving it a pretty good go. So I hope to come back at one or two things, Jackie, and maybe in response to what you and Graham have got to say. But I think what is missing right now on the Labour left, while there's individual aspects of good work, there is no coherent fight back that we can all sign up to.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, if you left the meeting confused, or I think a good word was disorientated about what was actually being suggested, I think that's of no surprise. Graham Bash, have we all been here before?
No, I totally agree, Mike. This is unprecedented. In my 55 or so years in political activity, I've seen nothing like it. This is not business as usual. And Jeremy would be the first to say that this is not just about Jeremy, it's about the future of the party, the future of the movement. So we've got this contradiction, haven't we? I don't think now, I do think that we've got to the point where it's difficult to see how the Labour Party can be saved. Not as a socialist party, but as a party representing Labour at any level. Certainly, it will not be the centre of resistance to the Tories in the next 2 years. That's on the streets, that's in the trade unions. And yet, it's not that simple, because the siren calls to join this party or that party, create a new party, are really, really understandable. And I'm totally in empathy. But where are most socialists at the moment? They're in the Labour Party. And what is still defines the Labour Party in so many ways is the affiliation of the major trade unions. So in my mind, we're in a period of transition. And I don't think that this transition is going to be resolved in any way before a Labour government in conflict with its rotten neoliberal programme, in conflict with trade unions and the movement from below. And I think that will define the future. So I've got no illusions. I don't think we can save the Labour Party. I do think a new party of Labour is needed. That doesn't mean at all that people tear up their party cards or unions disaffiliate. Not for the moment. We need to prepare our ground, because new parties don't come because a few socialists want it to come. It comes from mass movements from below. And the one place it won't come is from an amalgam of all the various socialist groups at the moment. It's not enough.
Okay, well, I'm going to challenge that totally. First of all, I'm going to start with challenging the statement, because I don't know how you know this, that most socialists are in the Labour Party. I don't think that's right at all. I don't even know why you think you know that. There's no evidence that that's true at all. Where I would agree is if we're talking about the road, say, to parliamentary change, then that's a different thing. Labour appears at the moment to be the only avenue for that. But I properly don't think anymore that the Labour Party has got the most socialists in than anywhere else. I think there's a lot more socialists now outside of Labour than inside. And I think more of them are thinking of not voting for the Labour Party than has ever done before. I also think we should think about, what the function of the Socialist Campaign Group is, because at the moment they're virtually non-existent. I mean, I agree with Mike, they're doing odd bits and pieces as individuals, commendable work, of course. But as a group, they're certainly not working as a group. They're certainly not working strategically. John McDonnell's not working strategically. What he's doing is exactly what he was doing 2 years ago and 4 years ago, which is say, let's concede and let's keep our heads down and it will all work out in the end. None of that is going to work either. And what I would call for is that the socialist group of MPs, or at least some of them, should start to think strategically about how to do this, because what we need, and this has been brought out by the amount of people, actually, if you go around and talk to them who have no clue that this is happening in the Labour Party, and the embargo in the mainstream media about what's happening, what we need is to get the news of this out. That's where we're going to hurt them. And that's why I'm suggesting things like, what should happen is people like Diane Abbott, who've got an extremely high profile, should actually put themselves on the line and, yes, risk being deselected to say some total home truths, because without doubt, I have no doubt that the media could not ignore the first ever Black female British MP being booted out of the Labour Party. They couldn't ignore that. They would have to in some way respond to that. And certainly what would happen is the Black community, who the Labour Party rely on hugely for support within inner city areas, would really start to ask serious questions. So I think what we should be doing is encouraging certain MPs who we know are politically, if you like, safe, to actually start speaking up. They're not just there to get their salaries. Yes, they're here representing the movement. And at the moment, they are not representing the movement. So who'd like to come back at me on that?
Quickly, before Graham perhaps has a fitting final word. Jackie, I mean, however we formulate the fight back, whether it's in the ways you describe, there has to be some kind of strategic fight back. And at the moment, as I say, for me, there are two trenches that we are failing to occupy. The first one is the internal one, obviously. If we are to signal to people outside the party the trade union movement and community organisations and anti-fascist and environmental groups that we are still potentially a vehicle for transformative social change. We have to do more than keep our heads down. And Graham is entirely right. And I think we all know this. And I suspect the people around Starmer are anticipating this as well, which is why they want to rout the left. They know there will be a fight back against their government. Of course there will be, because they are not equipped to deal with the crisis. And they have no intention of dealing with the multiple crises that will, those political realities that a Starmer-led government will quickly run into. So we need to do something, whether it's, as how you formulated, Jackie, that's going to signal to people that we have a pulse and that we are still organising. The second one, and just lastly, listen, as we know, we are in a period now where, as Stuart Hall might have described it, the ruling class are policing the crisis. They are becoming ever more authoritarian. They are removing rights. They are raising folk devils, immigrants, asylum seekers, environmentalists, for people to channel their anger and disaffection towards. And I'm afraid under Starmer, the Labour Party are becoming part of this authoritarian trend. And that, not only internally, but as a matter of principle, we have to stand up against that, because that's part of a wider authoritarian creep on the right of politics, but also around Starmer in the Labour Party. So both these trenches need occupying, they need organised, and no one's going to do it unless the Labour left do it.
Okay, Graham.
Well, some good creative challenges. I'm amazed that you think there's so many differences. I have to say, I've gone further than I've ever gone before. I mean, did you hear what I said? I said, I cannot now see that Labour can be saved. And I've never said that before. I said we're getting there, but I think this is a key moment. But that doesn't mean that we, as I said, that we tear up our party cards. You asked for evidence. Well, of course, I haven't got the evidence here in front of me. But the reality is that Jeremy brought hundreds of thousands of socialists into the Labour Party. Many of them have left, some have been expelled, but many remain as sleeping members. And the reason they remain, for the most part, is that they can't see an alternative. Now, I saw the alternative put forward by Momentum, for instance, recently, which was keep your head down and fight. Well, my first response is it's a pity you didn't fight when it really mattered, rather than helping to enable the anti-Semitism witch hunt, which is what their leadership at the time did, with huge damage to Corbyn and the whole of the left. So they've said that. I think you're right to criticise John McDonnell, but I think it's over the top to say he's kept his head down. He's one of the few MPs who's actually come out, like Diane has, and actually fundamentally criticised the authoritarian actions of the Starmer leadership. But it is too little, and it is, I'm afraid, a bit late as well on the part of the whole of the Socialist campaign group. Interesting views about what they should do. I think that's up for discussion. But the two words that I've got written down on my piece of paper here, when we're talking about building new parties, two words: trade unions. I don't want to be schematic, but the trade unions and the socialist groups built the Labour Party. And if we're talking about recreating a Labour Party, then it may be 100 years later, but it will be the trade unions and the socialist groupings, or it won't happen. And the reason we're all struggling for answers is that we're between historical periods. The historical period of Labourism, which is coming, I think, to its end, and the creation of something new, which cannot just be wished. We have to build it. And for us to call on, I'm not saying you're saying this, but for people to call on people to tear up their party cards, or for unions to disaffiliate, without at the same time that being part of creating something new, is actually asking people to step into the political wilderness. And I, for one, won't do that. But I'm committed to spending the years I have left recognising that Labour will not be saved. I can't see because the establishment party, if you like, the establishment faction of the Labour Party had such a fundamental fright. They will freeze us out forever. So our task is to try to build anew. How we do it, I don't know. Honestly, events will decide, but I cannot see it happening before and outside of the Starmer-led Labour government attacking our movement and us building that resistance from below, from which it must always be built. In the beginning is the class struggle.
One thing you're totally right about, not just one thing, but one thing you're totally right about, is the fact that actually it's the battle that is to come that's going to be crucial. And it's the battle once Starmer becomes the Prime Minister.
Yeah.
And at that point, my problem is that John McDonnell, the Socialist campaign group, are not readying people for that fight. He is still actually preparing them for keeping their heads down. And he's so worried about losing members that in a way, he's lost sight of the long term. And he must know that there's a fight to come. But you don't actually empower your activists by teaching them to keep their head down alone. And that's where I think Mike has got it absolutely right, that in fact, you've got to be fighting in two trenches, which doesn't mean, by the way, that we shouldn't see a bit more militant action coming in from those people who are on the SCG and SAFE in order to give us that level of publicity. Right, okay, and we are at the end. Thank you very much to everybody. No doubt we'll see you again. Bye.